Thanks, Gareth. We'll welcome everyone to this Education and Skills Corporate Delivery Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 26th of October, 2022. Nice to see you all. I am at home today because I'm feeling a little bit off colour. I didn't want to infect everyone by coming into the Gloucester room. That's why I'm here. Otherwise, I would be in the Guildhall there. So can I start the meeting off, please, with Agenda 1 and ask for any apologies for absence? Oh, I was going to give my apology for Councillor Fiona Gordon, and I just noticed she's there. Well, thank you, Fiona.
Thanks.
Do we have any other apologies, Gareth?
No, I've had none as yet, Chair.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item number 2, disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Do we have any? No, thank you very much. Item number 3, this is the minutes for the last meeting, the meeting held on the 28th of September. Can I ask for us to go through them page by page, please? Page 1, page 2, and page 3. If we are content that they're an accurate record, then I can sign them on your behalf if somebody proposes and seconds. Is that okay? You content? All content. Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Fiona, Chang. And then moving on to item number 4, we have a verbal report on strengthening school leaders. Can I pass over then to Helen Morgan-Rees and Cabinet Member Robert Smith, please, to move that?
Thanks, Chair. If I start, if that's okay, Councillor Smith, just to introduce, we've got some officers in the room, obviously in the Kent room there, we'll be able to give a comprehensive verbal update. But by means of introduction, the work we do in developing our leaders in Swansea is very much a complementary approach in terms of the regional partnership we have. So the role of partneriaeth is obviously to develop leadership stemming from leadership programmes at a national level. And then our work in Swansea is very much complementary in supporting our leaders. And the bulk of our work is focused in terms of our new and acting leaders in Swansea. So we are developing a handbook and our officers will speak about the handbook in a minute. But we very much want to meet the needs of our current cohort of leaders in Swansea. And in order to do that, obviously understanding their current needs is absolutely important. So the officers will probably take you through the approaches that we have and providing a verbal update in that respect. That's all I needed to say. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Who is going to lead in the room there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Chair, if I may, to echo what Helen has just said. You know, we know how essential school leadership is, making sure that we have a supply and a pool of effective school leaders is going to be at the core of making sure of driving forward the whole education agenda in Swansea. There were major concerns nationally about 10 years ago about the pool of school leaders. I think there's still concerns. There's nothing, we can't rest on our laurels on this. But I think what the officers will be describing now are the efforts that we as an authority are making, both on our own, in partnership through partneriaeth, and in conjunction with Welsh Government, to try and ensure that there is that supply of senior leaders and middle leaders across all of our schools. So I look forward to the presentation, Chair.
That's lovely. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Who are we moving on to now?
Chair, if I can introduce myself. So I'm David Thomas. So I'm on secondment as a head teacher from Portmead Primary School. And as Rodri Jones, head of service, has described me earlier on, that I'm on secondment from my secondment. So currently the principal in school improvement advisor on an interim basis, with a verbal update on leadership development for Swansea. So if I may, Chair, where we start with this in Swansea is at school level, obviously, and the Helen Morgan-Rees, the director, has described how our working relationship with partneriaeth is a complementary one, and we support fully the national programme, which is delivered via that regional approach. and that's promoted through the school improvement advisors that are both commissioned and employed by the local authority, and through the various communication lines, one of them being the education newsletter. At school level, the school support visits that are undertaken roughly 3 times a year with every school, there's pertinent questions around the involvement of pupils, so it starts at that level. And I know we're talking about adults in the main, but pupils have a really key role in the leadership of their schools. And as they get older, that does influence the work of the school, so it's really pertinent that we listen to the voice of our pupils. And the school improvement visit agenda has a key focus on how schools are developing our pupils as leaders and how that impacts on the work of the school. In terms of how our school leaders and head teachers are looking to develop school leadership, the support visit agenda, it has a real focus on the planning for professional learning for their staff, and that's not just about providing new staff with the skills they are required with Curriculum for Wales, but also the skills that they will need to become leaders themselves. So middle leadership has been discussed already, and that's a key focus of those discussions that take place, especially when it comes to the focus for curriculum development and middle leaders. There's a focus within that agenda and the discussions that my colleagues have with school leaders about distributed leadership within schools. So we're really keen to identify individuals.
David. Sorry, David, could I just ask it? What did you say? Distributive leadership, did you say?
Yeah, distributed leadership, yes.
Lovely, thank you.
Apologies if I'm going too fast, Chair. There's a key focus on how our senior leaders in schools are establishing a distributed leadership system. So that makes a further reference to how we are supporting and promoting middle leaders. And I'll come on to a little bit about one of those Swansea specific processes we've got to support that. In terms of areas of learning and experience leadership, which is a key focus, again, through Curriculum for Wales development at the moment, we're working with a number of educational professionals that Swansea have brokered through what we hear from our head teachers as a need, and that's to develop a shared understanding of progression through, again, the curriculum reform agenda that sits, pan Wales. And that's provided us with opportunities to reach wider within our schools to find those individuals who can lead for us. And practically what that looks like as a school level is, the revisit of staff audits to find out where our skills lie within schools. And the pandemic has caused us to pause on that inadvertently, and now we're seeing that to be revisited, and very welcome indeed. Partneriaeth, as the director mentions, is our, pardon the pun, partner in this professional learning journey. And the Welsh Government's Schools as Learning Organisation model, which is a Welsh Government audit, is being used well, but it needs to be promoted. And the outcomes from that SLO does provide individual schools with some key actions, specifically when it comes to leadership. And the school visit agendas, which I keep making reference to, we are beginning to evaluate the impact of leadership on the progress that learners make. I think it's fair to say, though, that that's going to be a key piece of work for our team going forwards, to continue to evaluate the impact of leadership on standards of learning. I move on to the national programmes, which, as I've said, are delivered through the region, through Partneriaeth. Some of you will be aware that we, one of our colleagues, job shares with Partneriaeth and our school improvement team. So we've got some really close links, uniquely in Swansea, and almost a way in to make best use of those programmes. I don't need to dwell on them because they're in the previous meeting report, although and applications are open currently for both the middle and the senior leader programme, and also the aspiring head teacher and national head teacher qualification. So those are used well in Swansea, and in fact, although I haven't got the figures currently, we tend to see a larger number of Swansea applications than we do from the other 3 local authorities. That could be down to our population. However, we also have, you know, and I'm biased, but we also have more of our established leaders who take part in the presentation, who become deliverers of those national programmes in Swansea than we see through the other local authorities. And that's just an indication of the strength and depth that we have with our leaders in Swansea, and as a result of the previous commitment that this local authority has given to school leaders previously. So a specific programme that Swansea is developing that may be worth, that we're going to review in the next few weeks, is the secondment opportunity that we have helped support in Swansea, and that looks at middle leaders, aspiring deputy head teachers potentially, to undertake a swap. They go to another school. You may have heard about this previously. And it bears fruit because those individuals have been successful in securing deputy headships very recently in the local authority. But also it provides them with opportunities when they go back to their host school to share good practice, effective practice that they've seen elsewhere. It also provides backfill opportunities when they do go to another school, and especially when those swaps take place, it allows for that cross-pollination of effective practice across the local authority. In terms of what is Swansea doing about the individuals that we've got who may sit outside of the national programmes, what are we doing with our current leaders that we know operate effectively? And we've got the consultative pool. So we invite expressions of interest from our current leaders to be part of the consultative pool. And we've currently got a number of head teachers and deputy head teachers who are working in settings that's not their host school, either due to leadership capacity issues in that school or because they're acting as models or mentors. That's a hugely successful programme that Swansea supports, both in terms of financial support on occasions and in terms of my team support for those leaders to support the governing bodies also. We are working with new officers to consider a governor pool, a consultative pool in the same way. We're conscious, owing to the curriculum reform, both agendas in terms of ALNet and Curriculum for Wales, that our governors may not all be best placed to fully evaluate the work of the school, both in terms of the leaders' impact for Curriculum for Wales, but in terms of the impact of some of the leaders, for example, additional learning needs coordinators. So there are plans afoot to further develop and provide resilience around our governors. And that's a key piece of work which we're going to be working with colleagues through my team and through other teams within the Directorate to make sure that governors are best placed. And there's the role of the school improvement advisor. So my team are currently flat out in schools as we speak, undertaking support visits, and they are that visit. We've co-constructed with the consultative groups, ACCA and SCASH, to co-construct this agenda, which school leaders themselves see fitted best to evaluate the performance of their school. And that relationship is key. We see ourselves as professional partners in that relationship, and we don't refer to ourselves as challenge advisors anymore, but as school improvement advisors and professional partners who support the school's evaluation, their self-evaluation of their performance. The school improvement advisor role is wide and varied. I won't go into detail, although they take part and lead governing bodies in the recruitment for head teachers and senior leaders. So that would be certainly for head teachers and deputy head teachers, and in the most cases assistant head teachers, and in some cases where there's a requirement for us to support schools to appoint senior leaders to the middle leader team. We also provide mentoring to head teachers in an informal basis as a service, and also we provide support to schools who would potentially cause us concern, and we try our very best to avoid that. That school improvement advisor role, as you'll be aware, utilises a number of individuals, both employed and commissioned. So we utilise those effective leaders that are head teachers in our schools, and we commission their time to do work for us, which in itself provides those opportunities for them as leaders themselves to make progress. So that's a whistle-stop tour of how I see the development for our senior leaders in Swansea. And Chair, if it's appropriate, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Can I ask committee members if they have any questions, please? I can't see any hands up online here. Do we have any? Oh, Fiona Gordon, please, Councillor Gordon.
Sorry, thanks. Yeah, thanks very much, David. I was interested in, could you tell me a little bit more about the school swaps to share good practice and that cross-pollination? Can you tell me how that's organised, please, and who takes part?
I can. We have a head teacher who has previously spearheaded a deputy head network for us, and it became apparent that some practitioners, teachers, individuals may well find themselves in a school for 20 years or so, and their opportunity to develop become limited. So it was mooted that a swap would be useful, and last year was the first year that this took place. So individuals expressed their interest within their own school, and that head teacher coordinated that, and she continues to do so, with the involvement of officers, with us involved. But to be fair, that individual leads it, on her own, to be honest. But we do support where required. And I haven't got the facts and figures for this year because we're about to undertake the first review. There's around 6 schools involved, and one practitioner would swap with another practitioner. For example, a teacher from Pennard would swap with a teacher from Town Hill Primary School, and they would meet regularly to discuss the progress. It's particularly useful from my point of view when a school leader or teacher swaps where the context is significantly different. For example, Pennard and Town Hill. And I've spoken to those individuals on a personal level, and they said the benefit to their experience has been, profound. I hope that explains.
Yeah, thank you. It's very interesting.
Thanks. If appropriate, we have a feedback session in the middle of November, which I'll attend, and if it should be tabled for future meetings, more than happy to chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, David. In that context situation, and the value, do we spend time encouraging and enabling teachers to understand the communities that they're going to work in at any level? I mean, as new teachers and as they progress in their careers, so they really understand and the statistical basis of the communities the school is set in, and also the cultural basis. Do we spend time in doing that to prepare and to make sure that the school is fully embedded into the life of the community?
There's 2 strands to my answer. The global strand is that there's a distinct focus in curriculum reform for us to really understand community schools, and Swansea is working hard to try and spearhead that. So that's an agenda coming from Welsh Government, and that certainly will feature in the future work between for 5 to 10 year plan. In terms on a school to school basis, definitely school practitioners, new practitioners, will automatically be aware of the context by which they find themselves in, and the way that would happen is the school visit agenda details the context of the school, and yes, and I don't know, Chair, if you were specifically making reference to the swaps that took place, or just school practitioners in general.
The swaps prompted the question, but I think it's a broader issue that I think was fleshed up by Professor Chris Chapman's Education Equity book, when Chris Chapman launched these meetings some time ago, and we asked him to come in and speak to us in July last year, I think it was, and he spoke about the need to really understand the context and the culture, so that we really understand where the kids are coming from, so that if we do have issues of perhaps separation and loss linked to issues of domestic violence that we've again touched on last year, to do with family members becoming incarcerated or the children being taken into care, then that awareness dramatically impacts the response of the teaching team at all levels, and the non-teaching team for that matter. And I just wonder whether there's something that we do focus on, because I don't know about this idea of automatic awareness. I don't think you get I know lots of middle-class friends of mine who go into deprived communities here and in England, and they rock to their core with the reality of people's lives that they've never seen before. from their comfortable upbringings, you know. I mentioned very briefly, my friend's son is a GP in a very nice suburb in the south of England. He didn't know that poor people existed, fair play, because there were none in his £2 million house when he grew up. You know, it's that balance and awareness which is critical, because effective communication and support is essential.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I can see that Helen's got her hand up. In response to that, schools that find themselves in a context such as you describe, I'm not talking about the £2 million house, we ensure that there's a sharp focus from the leadership team on things like the development of an understanding for ACEs, that's adverse childhood experiences. There's key pieces of work that take place for trauma-informed schools. So as part of the school improvement advisor work, we task the school to set their context quite clearly at the start of the document. That leads the discussion, and then we unpick the work that the school leaders are doing in order to make sure their workforce are suitably skilled with those, for us, trauma informed, those emotionally available adults, some of these types of approaches, and that would really form the focus of the visit. And it leads back to what I said earlier on, that, you know, we're really trying to unpick how leaders are developing others through that agenda. So yeah, genuinely, there's a focus on that school context, and Swansea, through the data team, provide a really robust and clear view of what the school looks like, using, you know, a range of statistical and contextual data.
Okay, thank you, David. Helen?
Thanks, Chair. Just to supplement David's answer, obviously to safeguard that clear understanding of the context in which they work, the National Professional Qualification for Headship in Wales provides you know, adequate kind of assessment opportunities to ensure that if you are qualified as a head in Wales, you are qualified to be a head teacher in any school in Wales. So there is that provision within the qualification route. And in addition, we have relatively new national standards, professional standards for leadership in Wales, and those standards also make reference to the context in which head teachers work, and particular reference to the curriculum, as David mentioned, and the pedagogy required to be bespoke really in certain areas, and obviously the curriculum that is designed at a local level. And when we say a local level, we mean at a school level, with full cognizance really of the context of that school in terms of curriculum design.
Got a couple of members in the room
you,
who want to
Helen.
ask questions, Chair.
Lovely, thank you, Gareth. Can you tell me who's first, please?
Lyndon Jones and then Mike White, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jones?
Great. Thank you, Chair. Could I ask first, to get my, excuse my ignorance, what is distributed leadership? That could be quite handy. Also, you mentioned about the fact that you go into schools 3 times a year. What would that visit look like when you actually go? And the third point I'd make is, you said that about a newsletter that goes out, and is that by an e-newsletter or whatever? What is the sort of take up on that as well? Okay, thank you. But thanks for the presentation. It was really, really interesting.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to leave my colleague to answer the last question about the newsletter, if that's okay, because we have an expert in the room. To us, distributed leadership is a question about how the school unpacks the jobs, the whole job that is in the box of a school. Now, in times gone by, it might have been seen that teachers spend time in the classroom and they teach the children, they send them home, and the head teacher sits and does all of the other stuff, which is leading the school. We see it differently. So the questions that we ask around distributed leadership are, how are we delegating roles and responsibilities to teachers and to other school leaders in order to have a greater impact? So we are aware that some schools are in need to get better, and some schools need to get better really quickly, and that's why distributed leadership is so important to us. Within distributed leadership, we also consider that there's a certain amount of succession planning that needs to be made. So it's a real priority for us that we see those leadership opportunities that head teachers would traditionally have to undertake are being undertaken by a broader range of professionals across the school. Is that suitable?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Great. And
yes, support that idea. Then on the what does the visit look like?
Okay.
When you go
So
in?
thanks. So
You have a cup of tea on arrival, and what's the next thing? Yeah.
Firstly, it's important to note that the school improvement advisor, the visitors are head teachers. So it's led by a head teacher. So I'm a head teacher whilst I'm on secondment to the local authority at the moment. The others might be a commissioned head teacher from a school. So, and they're all, we vet them. So they're all of sound mind and they're effective. So the visit agenda has been set out over 3 terms, okay, and that agenda looks at 3 areas. It's led by Welsh Government's school improvement guidance, and so it's organised under the headings of leadership, teaching, and well-being. I'm summarising briefly, and what we discuss the school's strategic leadership, and that takes into account distributed leadership. We talk about what they do practically. We talk about what the curriculum vision looks like. So how have they developed a curriculum? How have they consulted with stakeholders? What does it look like? We go into classrooms during some of these visits. We listen to children. We go and meet with them, and we take them with their books. We talk to school leaders, to teachers. We speak to governors. We don't often get to speak to parents, but we evaluate the school's use of questionnaires to parents. We look at school development plans, and we look at self-evaluation documents, which to me are quality assurance documents. What is the school doing to ensure that the work of the school is of high quality? So when do they look at books together? When do they observe learning? When do they consult with stakeholders and listen to pupils, etc., etc.? So there's a wide range of activities that the school improvement advisor would undertake across the year. And in essence, that is led by the agenda set in the school improvement guidance under the 3 headings: leadership, teaching, and well-being.
Yeah, onto the newsletter then. So it's an e-newsletter that goes out once a week during term time to all our schools, and also now to wider education stakeholders as well. The reason for its introduction initially was that we got a lot of feedback from our head teachers with the amount of email traffic that comes into school, just purely from a council perspective to start with, and then all the external organisations and from Welsh Government, etc. So what we agreed was that we'd have one channel of communication that if they needed to read anything in a week, it was that one key document. So in there, you'd put in any requests for information from schools, professional learning offer, events that happen locally, training, key messages from the director, key decisions that have been taken, etc., etc. And that gave us then that one place that head teachers needed to look out for, because I'm sure yourselves as counsellors, the amount of emails you get in a day, it's very difficult to stay on top of that whilst you're running a busy school. So what we try and do is we put them all into one place so they know where to turn to. So that gives them all that the offer from Partneriaeth, from Welsh Government, from ourselves. We're constantly reviewing it, because I think what happened during COVID was that it became an information dump really into a document. So we're starting to think about a bit more about how that looks. It does now get shared across the whole school, so all school staff now receive a copy of the newsletter. But what we wanted to try and get to a position is that when you open that newsletter, that you know straight away, all right, there's an item on that, and they can click through to it rather than have to scroll through the whole newsletter to find what they want. So we're always looking to improve that offer. But the thinking behind it was there's that one-stop shop of the key information that we needed to share.
That's lovely. Thank you, Rodri. Is that okay? Councillor Jones, Lyndon, is that okay?
Okay, thank you, David.
Lovely. Where are we now? I'm going on to Councillor Mike White next, and then on to Councillor Yvonne Jardine after that. So, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah, obviously we know that as governor, schools, teach staff, we obviously have the PPA time and encouraged to go on additional training courses to enhance their qualifications that would lead to further education achievements. And they enhance their career and lead to qualifications to deputy headship status. Is that process functioning within all our schools? Is that actually happening? And secondly, you say the involvement obviously with children, you know, in seeing that obviously what's been taught through school. How does this dialogue take place? Is it through involvement with the representatives of schools councils, or is it done in any other way through perhaps done through years within the school? You know, selection of children perhaps within in primary, obviously from year well, I would say year 2 upwards to year 6. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. If I can, I'll deal with the latter point first. So we consider them as pupil voice groups, learner voice groups, and in some schools, some of our smaller primary schools might be in a position to involve nearly all of their children. I see nearly all because it's not always appropriate that our youngest learners have an appreciation of all of the issues. So from the majority of our schools, we have pupil voice groups. As you suggest, school councils, eco councils, various different groups. Some schools operate a system which is likened to the Senedd, they call it. So all children, or nearly all children of an age appropriate and stage appropriate would take part in some group or another. And that's effective. I'll share honestly that schools have found it very difficult during the pandemic to operate effectively, and now there's a real drive to regain an appreciation of how children feel for education. And some effective schools have been able to continue that through an online platform, but for those schools particularly who find themselves in more challenging contexts, who would rely on an adult to support that learner, have found that really difficult. So a number of our schools are really now beginning to fully re-engage in that process to understand how learners feel. And usefully, the conduit for that has been the requirement for us to co-construct a curriculum local to us. So children are being consulted at a basic level by their teachers to find out what it is they want to learn and how they want to learn about it. So I hope, Councillor, that answers that question. In terms of the progress we're making for professional learning, I think at the moment, from my experience and our team's experience, we know that there are a higher number potentially of internal candidates becoming successful to sort of senior and middle leaders. So what I've seen personally is a reduced number of applications to deputy head teacher posts, for example. A really low number of applicants, and certainly across the Welsh medium sector, that's something that we're considering and is a focus for us. In terms of the effectiveness of professional learning, I think it's fair to say that partneriaeth, who we effectively, and Helen might chip in, we effectively broker, our the bulk of our professional learning are establishing themselves in that process. And to make you feel comfortable with that accountability, I meet with our strategic lead for the region, currently on a minimum of a monthly basis, but it's more like 2 weekly, because we're robustly sharing the views of our senior leaders, our head teachers, on the quality and the impact of that provision on that professional learning. So we're really holding partneriaeth to account for the quality of their offer. And perhaps another area of focus could be the professional, the qualifications that leaders could gain. And we are seeing the likes of the University of Wales, Trinity St David, the Open University, broaden their offer for professional learning, both at early teacher careers, but into leadership as well. And for example, England offer a national professional qualification for senior leaders. It's echoed in our Welsh offer, but they also offer other professional learning as well, which does give people qualifications. So I think that's an area that we could hope to consider in the future. And I think it's fair to say that professional development through the application and vacancies to positions such as headships and deputy headships has been stalled in some ways because of the pandemic. So we'll see what the next 3 years bring. Is that suitable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, David. Can I go to Councillor Yvonne Jardine next, please? Yvonne, you did have your hand up, but it's gone down. But do you still want
Yes,
to
I
ask
did.
a
I took
question?
it down because it was like in the way. Yes, I do.
Lovely.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Chair. Okay. So first of all, apologies. I was a little bit late. So if I'm asking a question that the answer was to, apologies in advance. Okay. So the distributed leadership. I know one of the school, some of the things you've said, quite a lot of them, in fact. One of the schools I'm governor for, those things happen now. So is it that you're looking, or we are looking to distribute this across all schools, across the whole of Swansea? That's my one question. The challenge advisor and the record keeping and the keeping an account of the different things that happen and the questionnaires and that. Is that just to be prepared for Estin, or are we doing it alongside Estin? Because I could be wrong, but I feel some of it happens also in preparation for Estin. And you mentioned about the teachers being aware of the culture, well, yeah, where the children are aced. You mentioned a few things, but I was wondering about the general culture that the child comes from a home from. And I'm not necessarily talking about Black and ethnic minority. I'm talking about the culture in our homes of all the children are different. Some are not exactly what we want or would expect, and some are better, some are. So do we take into account that that child might be coming to school, listening to their parents fighting all night, for example? Or coming to school because mum's ill because she's pregnant or not, or she's ill for whatever reason. So I know it's quite difficult when you've got 30 young people in front of you, or 30 people, but are we going to take those things into account? Not just the top tier, the obvious things, but how far are we going to drill down? It also often begs the question for the schools I'm governor for: when does the head have time for and her leadership team? So yeah, those are really my questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I could probably take the next 3 weeks to answer that question, but I'll try to summarise. I'll start at the bottom, if I may. So in terms of time that we allocate our leaders to undertake some of those tasks, it's a difficult one, and schools operate in different ways. Head teachers can give themselves leadership time and the space to do that, and governors should support that. And it does depend on the context, I have to be honest with you. In terms of schools do operate and can make considerations for providing leadership time for their school leaders, for those who have teaching and learning responsibility payments, or for other middle leaders. And we see that happening consistently across Swansea. The offer looks different from school to school, but we're comfortable that happens most consistently across Swansea. I hope that's suitable. In terms of the culture and the context answer or question that you asked, something that schools will be acutely aware of are the cross-cutting themes that are covered by both relationships, sexuality education agenda and religious values and ethics agenda. Two hot topics at the moment, which schools are embracing particularly well with, in the light of both the good work from Swansea's past for the Conventions on the Rights of the Child, and led very well by a local authority officer who's seconded to our team, who is providing excellent professional learning to address some of those issues that you raise about that equality, that equity, that awareness raising of as you've described, and not just that from those groups who consider themselves to be ethnic groups, etc., but certainly across that ethical pathway. And that's a key piece of work that we're undertaking and forms part of my team's visit, and asks some really pertinent questions to the school's work around the development of that area. In terms of how are we preparing our practitioners for how children come to school, you're right, children do come to school with different states. And where that happens on a statutory level, where there's a police involvement, you may be aware of something called Operation Encompass, which alerts the school to a police attendance at the property the previous evening, and school leaders have access training such as previously mentioned trauma-informed schools, and it's being widely used across Swansea. In fact, our EP service provided money and cash to schools over the last, perhaps not last academic year, but the previous academic year, to provide training for an individual who would be specific in each setting to manage and deal with some of those issues as they came up on a day-to-day basis. But also the work that schools have been doing to make their adults emotionally available. And there's a piece of work around that, so that, and in some of our best schools, as identified by the inspectorate, which you make your reference to, there is examples of good practice, effective practice, and we've written case studies for Wales around the emotionally available adults. And that's a programme that is being supported again in partnership with the region, and work that we use our pupil deprivation grant for. So again, that's another a piece of work that we undertake during the visits to evaluate the cost effectiveness of the pupil deprivation grant, so the development grant that all schools received based on their context. In terms of the records and the accounts that we write, Councillor, we don't write because Estin visit. We write with the focus for us is to evaluate the performance of that school and to help the school understand its performance. So that's a key focus for us. And as I mentioned earlier on, something that's coming to sharp into view for me is how we're supporting schools to evaluate the impact of their leadership on the standards and progress that learners make. So we don't do it for Estin, but Estin will share our view that we need to hold teachers to account, head teachers to account, for the impact their actions have on pupil progress, and that's sharp in our focus. And in terms of the distributed leadership that you ask, it's a question we ask of all schools, and I think I said earlier on that some schools will do it particularly well, and you might see their growth to be quicker than others, and some needs their hands held. So we may offer where we notify, we note effective practice, which is again part of the support visit, and we record that on an online form for all of our visits. We will then signpost schools that do that effectively, as we see it, to link up with those schools who may not be distributing the leadership, the jobs, if they're not giving those out in a way that is being useful and helping the school to progress. And lastly, in terms of the accountability, all chairs of governors are now named on the report that will be received by the end of December of this academic year, and should receive an email from the School Improvement Advisor, which is the finalised report for that term that the school would receive. So chairs of governors get a copy of that report, and I would urge, if you're one of those individuals, that you read it, and any questions that you've got, firstly take them up with the head teacher, but secondly you'll have the contact details for the School Improvement Advisor also. Is that suitable, Councillor?
That is. Thank you very much for a very full answer. Thanks.
No problem.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for the question, Yvonne, and thanks for the answer, David. And it didn't take 3 weeks, so well done for that. Helen, Morgan Rees had a hand up and it's gone back down. So Helen, do you want to come in?
I think David, our Principal School Improvement answer, has answered comprehensively just on the range of professional learning for leaders across Wales. I mean, it's extensive, isn't it? There are so many commercial companies offering professional learning to our leaders in our schools. We have the consortium. Indeed, we have other consortia in Wales as well, where we have cross-consortium collaboration. So the range and scope of professional learning across Wales is so extensive, but it's tailoring that to the needs of the school. And as you said earlier on, Chair, it's about the context in which the school is working. So the leadership needs really may differ from school to school, professional learning may differ. But it's very much tailoring it and bespoking it to the needs of the locale and the context of the school. And when David mentioned the relationship in terms of ensuring that our needs are met in Swansea, that's been a mantra of ours when we set up Partneriaeth as a new region. And indeed, the other directors of education would concur that we very much need the new partnership to meet the needs of our local authorities, as well as delivering the national development programmes for leadership. We need to be very clear with our priorities, our needs, our asks of the region as well. So I think David made that point clear. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Helen. Do we have any other hands up in the room there, Gareth?
Yeah, if I could come in, Chair. Well, I think
Member Rob Smith, yeah, go on.
What David has described there, you know, we're talking about distributed leadership, harnessing the talent of school leaders across the whole of Swansea to achieve what we want to do, on a system-wide approach so that school leaders aren't just focused on the school where they work, important though that is, but that they also are able to deploy their talent elsewhere within Swansea where that's appropriate and where that's needed. I think that's a crucial part of this approach. And also ensuring a freshness in our schools. You know, we don't want our schools stagnating because of long established practices being implemented for the sake of it. We want that culture of continual renewal, continual review. And I think that all the different segments of the system that we've got here contribute to that. Is it perfect? Of course, it's not perfect. Every system, it by its very nature, needs to renew. It needs to be reviewed all the time. I'm glad that that's part of the system that we are constantly evaluating. But what I can say is, you know, what we are doing here is in line with the most high performing systems in the OECD, that there's evidence to support this kind of approach. And I think, you know, it's something that we've got to roll out and continue to support and evolve over the years, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. That's very helpful. For me, a couple of points. I mean, I always make lots of comments and then confuse myself because I don't know which part I'm looking at. But what I'm looking at here is this recurring reference to professional learning, to the national, the regional, the local. And the essential thing I think that we've got to never take our eye off refers to what the Cabinet member said, and that's this culture, the culture of continual renewal, of motivated frontline staff who are passionate about children, passionate about the learning opportunities we afford them. And as Helen said, you know, there's so many learning organisations. Education's big business. There's huge amounts of cash in education in Wales. And for me, I think what we've got to focus on is how we are making the progress. So do we have targets? There's lots of activity, there's lots of energy, but do we have targets for establishing this pool of motivated, aspiring leaders? Have we thought about, or is that in the planning process at the moment? How we are looking to get that newly qualified teacher in, or learning support assistant wants to maybe step in that direction? Have we got targets for showing numbers, hard numbers that are going to sort of really populate our leadership roles for the future? That's interesting to me. I can see movement between schools and how that adds value. But then if we have too many heads moving to too many different schools, then we've got weaker headship in those original schools where those inspiring leaders have come from. So they've got to be backfilled by these motivated, aspirational leaders. And I think in a previous report, we heard that people going through schools, experienced teachers don't want to aspire up to middle and senior leadership because there's too much, well, there's too much everything. The job is too challenging and maybe too bureaucratic. I'm not going to mention the bureaucracy about a bonfire of bureaucracy again because I keep saying that. But that's my. I'll pass the on to Helen Morgan-Rees, please, Helen.
Thanks, Chair. It's a very important question you raise in terms of that supply chain and that continual pipeline in Swansea. We very much pride ourselves here on growing our own leaders and making sure we have that continuous supply. Obviously, the challenge is different. Coming out of the pandemic, we may have fewer leaders who want to stay on as leaders and may wish to retire early. So we are working with other agencies to understand what the reasons behind that may be. One of those is the National Academy for Leadership in Wales. So we're trying to do a piece of work and research with them in terms of the retention and recruitment of leaders. But certainly we very much view this as a supply chain, as a continuum. So we know that the national standards for leaders apply to a range of leaders, not just, you know, the heads and deputies and assistant heads, but very much those who aspire from a young position in their career. So we try and talent spot. I think that's something that we do, and we keep an eye then on the pipeline, on that continuum. Have we got enough head teachers? Have we got enough head teachers to cover the different sectors we have, whether they are Welsh medium, special needs, and that kind of thing. And we check then, have we got enough middle leaders going through the middle leadership courses, that kind of pipeline. And also, if we've got middle leadership issues, where we know, for example, the recruitment pool for Welsh medium head teachers is a pretty shallow pool, and that's the same across Wales. So we need to be more proactive in that respect if we know we've got a shallow pool to begin with. So I think we do keep those elements of the pipeline in check very closely.
And I think, Joe, one of the things that I'd say on that, yes, that pipeline is absolutely crucial, and I don't diminish it in any way. But one of the advantages that distributed leadership brings is that you do give all staff that opportunity to specialize and lead in some aspect or other of a school's work, so that you're broadening the pool. And yes, there are a lot of people, a lot of teachers, a lot of practitioners that don't want to become head teachers. They don't want to become deputy head teachers. They want to be in the classroom. That's fine. But they can perform a leadership role, a role that's as valuable and as important as the deputy head and the head teacher. And I think that's something that approach allows for.
I think we've got the next speaker, Councillor Lyndon Jones. Lyndon?
Joy first, because I've already done one, but I'll come back. Yeah.
Joy,
Thank you.
Joy, I do apologise, but
That's all right.
I didn't see that you wanted to speak. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you. My question is to David. Have you considered, or do you employ a system of peer mentoring in leadership, either for the aspirational leader or for somebody who is new in post?
Yes to both. Certainly for those individuals, if we've got a number of schools in Swansea where the, deputy head teachers find themselves acting head teachers, and automatically there's a system in Swansea where one of our extensively experienced head teachers will pick them up and mentor them, or provide another mentor. So that's that situation. Our aspirational leaders will follow the national pathway, led by the secondee who works for the local authority as it happens, and will be assigned both a mentor formally and also will take part in a pathway, a programme of leadership development activities. So it's both responsive to needs and proactive. So yes, but informally, outside of both those two systems I describe, my team, the School Improvement Advisors, offer that peer mentorship by default. And an example of that will be that following a school visit, for example, that individual officer or commissioned head teacher is effectively on demand for that individual. So we'll find, and gets reported to me, that a number of my our commissioned or permanent employees respond on a really regular basis to individuals who seek that PS or that mentor process. So it happens both formally and informally, and successfully in Swansea. If I may, it does go on to a point, Chair, that you bring up about targets. I think it's fair to say we don't set ourselves any numerical targets to achieve X number of new headships within an academic year or a period of time. That would be unrealistic, because we would just fall at our feet. That's in line with Curriculum for Wales, to be fair. And one of the key successes that we should celebrate in Swansea is that we are a local authority that provides our leaders with autonomy. and that bears fruit because, as you will read in the local authority inspection, our schools are performing well. It's a high performing culture, and that you might get worried about providing too much autonomy, but the school improvement service and its partners ensure that accountability is kept in check, for want of a better phrase, that we continually consider the impact of leadership and the performance of those schools through those processes. So that autonomy provides us with opportunities, and whilst I understand, Chair, your request to see some targets, some stats, we actively avoid those because they could just become pitfalls. But we are ambitious. My team hold a full list of schools that's reviewed on a regular basis by both myself, by Rodri and by Helen, and where there are opportunities for us to consider leaders for us to utilise those individual skills. They have either already sought an expression of interest, or my team ensure that I have overview of those who are not being utilised in a way that we could perhaps use them in another school, for example, and where possible, we make best use of that.
If I can just come in before Lyndon, because it's directly on that, because I think there are opportunities to develop what David's describing in terms of the peer mentoring, and also peer reviews, where you bring head teacher, or a head teacher invites other head teachers, or one head teacher in. It's not something we want to impose, to look at the whole school, an aspect of the school or whatever, and have that fresh pair of eyes. And I think that's a way as well of injecting the freshness into our schools. And that may be something for this committee looking forward, when we look to the future, to look at, well, you know, that could be something that we need to embed and develop further in Swansea. And I think that's something for the committee to consider.
No,
absolutely. Go on, Lyndon.
Thanks. Obviously, around school leaders, what with the work that you're doing, what works well, and the other side of that, what do you think has not worked so well? And are there people in the schools who you are not picking up? One thing I know, looking at Robert and Helen, I've said this, and you, Chair, a couple of times before, about the new curriculum. The current, or the old curriculum, was prescriptive, the new one isn't. And for some teachers, that's really exciting. And for a lot of teachers, and I know they're on fire with it, but for those who've been doing the old system for many years, are we losing them? Are they being caught up? And are we able to help them? Because if they don't succeed, the pupils will fail. They'll be the ones that lose out, really. So those are the 3 points. Thank you.
Okay, so what doesn't work well? Where we see, if there's a school that identifies someone who they would class as a leader, I'm assuming you want me to answer these questions. Someone who isn't operating well as a leader is somebody perhaps who you described, who perhaps lacks enthusiasm, lacks drive. They might feel that their way is the way they've been doing it for 20 years. We don't come across this very often, if I'm honest with you. And I think, without being able to consider that, over a period of time, one of those things is about the head teacher of that school needs to have clear aspirations for their individual leaders. So, there needs to be clarity over succession planning. So, we want to take the right people with us, is the key message. And case in point, in my school, Portmead, we've seen a number of individuals come and go, whereas previously they hadn't, and that's because the bar was raised. So, my aspirations for pupils were high, and therefore all of a sudden we raised the bar across the board. So it's an answer. I think I've answered the question, 2 questions in one, really. If we have a low bar, that's your outcome, and if we have a high bar, then you see progress. Can you please ask the second part of your question, or the third?
That was about what worked well and what didn't work well, and you've done that. And I mentioned then about the curriculum.
Sorry, Lyndon, could you put your microphone on, please?
Sorry about that. The first one, what works well, what doesn't work well. Yeah. You've done that. I mentioned about the curriculum. The old system was very prescriptive, and people were used to that. Are we with some teachers who've been doing that for many years, we need to hold them by the hand really to take them with us. But they've been picked up by the sound of it. You've almost answered that with your previous answers, actually. They need to be picked up because pupils are the only ones who would lose out with that. And as I mentioned, Robert, I've mentioned it to Robert, Helen and the chair, that issue on a number of times. But it's something we need to continually look at.
Specifically, if I may, based on, I'm making lots of reference to the school improvement agenda, the visits. Two things specifically that we asked the leaders that, you know, we've got to hold our head teachers to account, because my team can't look at every teacher across Swansea. So we've got to trust our leaders. And we asked two questions. What are you doing to develop the curriculum for Portmead Primary School, for Bryn Hyfryd Primary School, whatever it would be? And we'd spend an hour talking about how that's been co-constructed, how they've listened to learners, how they've listened to staff, how they've listened to parents, and we'd detail that and we'd see their plans. So that's a real key focus for that visit. And secondly, we ask, what is the workforce capacity and capability looking like? Have we got teachers that need their hand held, as we've described it? Have we got teachers who need to go and see practice in other areas that is more effective? Or have we got teachers that are so good that we want to share that? And that's a key part of the report, both effective practice that we've identified worthy of sharing and the support requirements. I've got 15 schools that have completed the online form out of 95 or settings. So I've got 15 out of 95 responses for support and effective practice at the moment. So I can't give you a broad brush of the requirements in Swansea, sorry, but by January, I'll be able to. So, you know, it's a really key focus. And what I can say is it's in the minority where we find practitioners who might be more well established who don't see the potential fruit from the tree that is Curriculum for Wales, because they've probably been wanting this autonomy for years but haven't had it. And actually their skills as experienced practitioners really enable the curriculum to take off in their settings. The skill of the head teacher is to make sure that that autonomy happens with a certain length of consistency, level of consistency as well, so that it is a cohesive curriculum that provides children, learners and their community with the autonomy to decide what learning is important for them in the constraints of Curriculum for Wales and the statements of what matter.
Thank you, David. Helen Morgan-Rees.
Thanks, Chair. Just to add to David's answer there around the curriculum, obviously the build up towards the implementation this September for all primary schools and the majority of secondary schools in Wales, their implementation from this September onwards. Obviously, that curriculum readiness journey has been hampered by the pandemic, but we have, as officers in the school improvement team in particular, a strong antenna now around curriculum readiness in the sense that we know what Welsh Government expects, we know what Estyn expects in terms of curriculum readiness, but there is also a degree of empathy out there in recognition of the pandemic that things have been hampered, and that the start of September would not be a light switch moment, and there would be a continual design and shaping of the curriculum. So that empathy is very much welcomed, because obviously the 2 years of the pandemic have not allowed schools to develop at the same pace. But we are very alert to what expectations we have of schools in Swansea. And we do have a barometer, so to speak, in terms of those who are not ready enough. And there are few rare examples of schools that are clearly not ready enough. And our support to those schools is very much an intensive package really of support to ensure that they catch up.
Thank you, Helen. Is anyone indicating in the room, Gareth?
Nobody now, Chair.
No, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So my just to go back to what David said about you know, lots of activity, as I said, but you know, targets, key performance indicators. You know, it's great to have autonomy, but we've got to know whether things are getting better or worse. If we're not collecting any data or key performance indicators, hard data or soft, then can we show that we're getting better? Or do we end up going in a position where we think we're doing well, but we don't, actually we're not making any progress? So that it's important for us as a council, as a committee of the council, to see that progress and to see that we are really expanding our base, our foundation of current and future leadership capacity as we go forward. Whatever that means, we need to see that we are getting better. Fiona made a point on the chat there. Distributed leadership is very important because it means somebody goes sick, somebody has an accident, something happens, then we can make sure that those key tasks, get done. Have we got enough people with the right skills, knowledge, experience, and qualifications to make sure that we can cope with all these eventualities? So that's my point, really. Not saying that we should be target driven, we should always be mission driven, but what gets measured does get done. And we need to make sure that we see that continuous progress over time, bearing in mind post-pandemic recovery and the significant issues that we do have, as every part of Wales does. So that was my point. I didn't mean just to set arbitrary targets and work towards them, but it's really important that we do see this progress and then see the value of partnership and see the value of the regional. And now we're sitting in with the Welsh Government level, we marry in that national strategy to grassroots community aspirations and activities. I'm saying too much, but the last point I wanted to make was about horizontal interweaving. So looking at school leadership, so teachers, non-teaching staff, the whole school approach, but the role of the governing body is absolutely fundamental. So we marry that to that. It's not for us to really watch with a microscope the role of schools. I mean, isn't that what governing bodies are about? So as we go forward in this committee this year, we'll marry school leadership with those governing body challenges as well. And also with the capacity that we have through parents and communities to add value to the learning experience of the schools. So we know there's opportunities that we need to look at in the round, really. And I'd suggest 360-degree feedback might not be a bad thing in some context, where we look at the whole school environment, warts and all. But there we go. Right. Okay. Thank you, everyone else. I can't see anybody else putting their hand up. There was a very full and detailed discussion. I'm quite disappointed to see that the meeting has gone over 1 hour. We've done quite well in the year so far, but we've just gone 7 minutes over the hour. But full and fruitful discussion, I think. Thank you very much, David, for what was very detailed and really informative information. That's very much appreciated indeed. So if we move on to the next agenda item, now that is the work plan. And we've all got a copy of the work plan at the back there. And we see that on the 23rd of November, which is the date of our next meeting at 4 o'clock, we will be again focusing in on strengthening school leaders. Do we know what the context is going to be building on this meeting for that meeting, Helen or Robert Smith? Do we have any detail about what the agenda will be there? Will it be another verbal report, or will we be having a presentation? Oh, sorry, Helen, go on, sorry.
I think it's up to the committee to decide really what direction you want to take us in next.
Right, okay.
Obviously, you've had a comprehensive verbal report today. If you would like to focus on any elements, I know Councillor Smith made reference to peer review there. We haven't mentioned in great detail really how we support and induct new and acting heads to Swansea in a lot of detail today. So we may wish to focus on that element, but it depends really what the committee wants.
Yeah, I don't want to lead the committee here, but I mean, those two issues, peer review and the induction support for new head teachers, what do we do to support people who are new in post? Not just new head teachers, new school leaders, but particularly head teachers. I think if we could have a verbal report there and see where that takes us, because I think there could be recommendations on changes that we want to make arising from that. But let's see what the officers come up with. I'm fairly confident that we have a robust system as is, but like every other system, it's good to review and it's good to tweak and move things forward.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Gordon?
Thanks. I'd be quite interested in finding out a little bit more about the role of the Elenco and how that's been affected by the the changes in the law, and how we are making sure that there is that support and the quality assurance and ongoing training and so on. As I tend to raise every time if the committee felt that that was appropriate, or if they think that that's just a little bit too specific, then that's fine.
Lovely, thank you, Fiona. And Helen Morgan-Rees?
Yeah, just to say that particular strand around ALN is being picked up in scrutiny.
Okay,
So just
fair enough. Yeah,
just
okay.
consider that is already being picked up in the work programme, I believe,
you.
in scrutiny.
What's the timescale for that scrutiny report? Do we know?
It'll be determined tomorrow. The work programme will be tomorrow.
Right, because it would be good if that could feed into this committee's deliberations when that's complete.
Mm.
Right, okay, right, rather than duplicate it here, but yeah,
Mhm.
because I think you're right, Fiona, that is something that needs to be considered. But it's we don't want to duplicate
wanna
work that's
duplicate,
done
no.
elsewhere.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, so if the committee is content, then we can take that advice, I think. Peer review, looking at leadership in the context of inducting new and acting heads. What I'd be interested to see is the career pathway for new teachers. So, we had mention of the universities there. So you're an aspiring teacher, you step into that environment, you do a teaching qualification, you get that job. How do we grow our own? Do we inspire? Do we motivate? What are the opportunities that we give people so they can see their career pathway, with some clarity? And I'd also ask a question about leadership in the wider school environment. Some of the strongest school leaders I've come across over the years have been school secretaries in many ways, through their engagement with wider impact and challenges, particularly in the pastoral context. So without opening up too widely, inducting new and acting heads, but the wider challenge of inspiring that pathway, that interest, because we have had mention a few times about morale and people not wanting to progress because there are particular challenges, which might be, as Helen alluded to, sharper now than they have been for a long time. Major changes to the curriculum in Wales, big pressures, as Lyndon, and in his role as chair of scrutiny, of course, he's very aware of these issues, but we got these particular pressures. How do we put our arms around these people so that they can feel inspired and motivated to really follow through with energy their original aspirations that led them to step towards teaching in the first place? We don't want that enthusiasm being lost. Is that okay, Helen?
It does depend a lot on officer resources, so we will be asking, I guess, David, our Principal School Improvement Advisor, to come back in November, and some of what you described there really is the remit of the region rather than the local authority.
Okay.
But we'll do our best, given the resources we've got between now and then, which is probably about 15 working days, but it will be a verbal report. So
Right.
Thanks for allowing it a verbal report.
Well, that's great. As long as the committee's content, I am, to give that flexibility to see what's reasonable in that short time frame. Are we happy? Any queries, any concerns, any worries there, committee? Can you wave or put your thumbs up or smile? Oh, there we are. Lovely. That's excellent. There we go. Well, noting, as I just mentioned, that the next meeting is on the 23rd of November at 4 o'clock. If there's nothing else, then I will close the meeting. Thank you all very much for your attendance.
Thank you, Chair.